So how are you all doing today? The topic of today is Azure. That's right. Are we all agree on the topic? Silence on the other side. Is everybody there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Good, good. It's a bit awkward, if you talk to a screen and it's completely silent. You say like, is anybody out there? That's a song of Pink Floyd, I
That's
think,
what
no?
we were doing for the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, no, I know. I was the one. Yeah, I apologize. But no, I'm happy we're all together. So this whole series of training sessions is all about a little bit the product, but most of it is focused on how do we start and engage in conversations with customers about Azure? How do we ask questions to trigger curiosity? And in order to do that, it is helpful to kind of understand a little bit what Azure is all about. It's a name that covers quite a big quantity of services and products in the cloud that I like to compare it with go shopping when you want to prepare a food. You start with what you want to prepare, what you want to serve to your guests, and you kind of visualize what it will look like, what it will taste like. And then you go to a shop and you start buying the ingredients you need. Some of the ingredients are already half manufactured, so you don't need to prepare a lot additional things. Some of them are really bare services or ingredients where you will then have to start cooking and be creative with it. With Azure, it's the same thing. You start from a business challenge, a business scenario that you may have on-prem or that you may run in something that is not yet the cloud or maybe in a private data center. And from that scenario onwards, you start looking at what do I need to make this possible? And then you start shopping in Azure, you start activating services, and obviously you need some technical expertise to do it. Is the expertise different from what you would do on-prem? Well, yes, in the sense that it is no longer with a screwdriver that you are running around in a data center to mount and dismount racks and storage and server items. You're just behind a screen, you activate resources, you make sure they all hang well together, you open them up to your users or your other applications, and you start working with it. So that's a bit the idea. And everything is about relevance. It's about, why do we do this training, by the way? We are living in let's say a period, I don't have to tell you, that is bulking with AI more and more, where you should consistently be aware of the question, how can I remain relevant in this moment where we are selling and providing value? I always think about my accountant who has like this office with 30 employees. And one day, it's about 2 years ago, he asks me, Hans, do you know? And he names the name of a certain partner. And I say, yes, I know this partner. And he asks, I say, why would you want to know? Do you have problems with your current IT provider or managed service provider? He said, no, it's all running fine. We get very good service level agreements. Their reaction time is perfect. It's all working excellently. But the other partner is providing me with ideas, is asking questions. It's like they are thinking with me business-wise. And so in the beginning, I felt it a little awkward, but as I got engaged with them, they really make me aware of new possibilities, and they do not only repair what is burning, they also open up new things. And 6 months later, they said bye-bye to their current partner and they switched to the new one. So that's where the value is. It's about triggering that little curiosity. It's about asking little questions about business challenges, about how they cope with it, about what works well, about what they might see as an improvement, how they are currently doing, who is involved, and so on and so forth. And this is the reason why we started with these sessions because this whole foundation that we are talking about, which is Azure, Copilot, the whole security theme, these are all the topics that are part of this sales mastery training. They're all somewhere part of this bigger story that opens up possibilities, and many of the technological possibilities are really, really out of scope at our customers. This is what we hear from Microsoft too. Everybody agrees that technically speaking, most people that are working with this kind of solutions, they know very well where the switches are and how to set it up, but they have difficulties in making it land, in opening up. Well, part of it is because there still is enough work without this. The people still, the demand is high enough, but there might be a moment where the demand will be maybe different, and where we can anticipate by asking interesting questions. And these questions would then indeed, as I say, be not as much on the different products that are on the shelves, but about what we are going to do with it. And within this program, on our shelf today, we are going to have a look at the ingredients that are part of the Azure environment. We will highlight them a little bit so you feel familiar with not knowing exactly all the details, but at least feel comfortable with the scenarios they cover and be able to ask questions. And in the other sessions, there is attention for everything that has to do with security, the Copilot, I guess we already did, and there's also one on managed services. So that's a little bit the purpose of the game. And in order to prepare, there were these two videos which you may have already watched or received. If not, you're going to get a whole handout with everything nicely organized. So the recording of today, the slides, the videos. But these are two little onboarding videos. One about sort of the history of technology from way back in the 80s to today. Because a lot of what happened in these past 30 to 40 years still leaves its traces today. If we tackle the subject of why people do not always feel comfortable with cloud solutions, with things they do not control, a lot of it traces back to, well, the early periods of IT. And the second video positions the Microsoft solutions, so the infrastructure, the software, etc., within that whole business story. So it's a nice warm-up to prepare for what's coming up. So if you haven't watched them, take a moment and enjoy it. And in one of the videos, as I said, we talk about the history, and I'm not going to go into detail of the whole video, but it starts way back in the 80s and even the 70s, where most of the desks were just like being equipped with a phone, a fax machine, things to write, maybe a typewriter, and those type-through sheets, etc. A bit like that. That was the Mercedes that was driven at that time. It's a good car, but compared to what we have now, maybe less performant. It took until the second half of the 80s and the early 90s to see the first affordable computers that were initially installed just in a what's called a peer-to-peer network. And for those who are more technical, they may say, Hans, we already know. For the newbies or the ones who are less familiar with these terms, that's why I put them in. So the peer-to-peer network are like, let's say you have a company, 10 computers, you plug all the computers together, they all need to be switched on, and then you can share resources on these computers. Obsolete technology, but leading to the client-server infrastructure, meaning the client is the computer, at that time not yet the mobile phone, because they didn't exist then. So mainly computers, large desktops and huge laptop computers, very expensive, high margin products, and they were put in a client-server network. So one big server in the middle, and then one second server for backup, and then maybe another server for maybe some appliances that were running, and all the computers attached to it with a secure connection towards the outside world. All on-prem. The fortune of a lot of IT businesses, including Bechtel, selling computers, selling hardware, selling firewalls, selling security appliances. That was where the big business was, together with licensing. And over here in this period, and we are talking beginning of the year 2000, We also see that Microsoft is increasingly reorganizing their licenses already with cloud computing and software as a service in their head. Think about software assurance. Software assurance was the first initiative, and I still remember because I helped to launch it. It was like people say, like, what? You are going to ask us to pay for something that we don't yet have, but that when it's available, we will get it. And we do have to pay you upfront. It's a bit like a subscription. You pay for something you have, and you know that you're going to get all the new stuff. Today, it's evident. I mean, few people will discuss about that. But at the time, it was really like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, where are we going? We want to buy the discs, we want to buy the licenses, install them, write them off, and then keep them updated, a lot of overhead, etc. And it took until 2010, which is not that long ago, when Microsoft launched Windows Azure at the time it was called. Now it's called Azure, at the time it was Windows Azure. And Office 365. And as you can see on this image, still very few data centers. So Microsoft built these huge buildings. They stuffed them with computer racks, hardware in it, compute power, and everything you needed, interconnected in what started to be the Microsoft network. So a huge worldwide interconnected set of data centers with points of entry where I, as a user, can just connect and do my thing. Now, some of you who were already born or active in that moment may remember a Microsoft title called Small Business Server. You can raise your hand if it still rings a bell. The Microsoft Small Business Server. If that somewhere rings a bell, feel free to just push raise hand so we can see. If it doesn't, then okay, I presume that it's not something you are familiar with. But let me briefly tell you what it's all about. The Small Business Server was a box that Microsoft put on the market with Windows licenses in it for a Windows server, for a SQL server, for an Exchange server, for a SharePoint server. So basically everything you need to email, to store information, and to manage databases. And it also came with client access licenses. So that's the license that I would need to be able to use the server, all in one package for, let's say, 25 users. It was really a small business-focused solution. And that was like in a box. HP, Lenovo, Fujitsu, etc. They sold this pre-installed on their machines. So you could really sell a huge server with Small Business Server running on it. And I remember at that time, a company, I think it was even a Belgian company, because you may or may not know I'm located in Belgium near the city of Ghent. And they wrote a little script in PowerShell. PowerShell is a programming language or a command language frequently used within the Microsoft environment. So they wrote this PowerShell script enabling companies within 2 hours to lift and shift the local small business server into the cloud. Amazing. So imagine you have 25 users working on a server that runs in your company. You write the little script, 25 Office 365 licenses are activated, mailboxes are prepared, mail is moved from one point to the other, the Azure servers are activated, the virtual machines, the mail server is activated, SQL is activated, everything in just 2 hours time. That was like everybody said, wow, this is amazing. Now, it was a kind of a nice experiment and a school class example of what that opened up as possibilities within cloud computing. And for a lot of people back in those days, it helped them to understand the power and the virtues of it. And today, obviously, 14 years later, which by the way is just a minor time lapse within the whole history of the world and the whole history of us being able to think and reason. But anyway, it has led to, well, this modern environment where indeed, as we know, it's about tools that are completely offered by the company that coexist perfectly with third-party tools and that will mainly meet those needs. So if we talk to customers, We can talk about this, and then we might end up being boring, because everything that is in here, you can find it on the internet. Everything that is in here is in the heads of our customers. They know what they are doing. They know for whom they are doing it. They know how to market and how to sell it. And hopefully they know how to take care of their customers, because that's where their business comes in, their money comes in. And in order to make sure that all this works, they have quite a vast number of activities that are supported by resources. And some of these resources are fairly normal because they have been using them for ages. Let's take the company car. In Belgium, I don't know how it's in your countries, but in Belgium, we have this policy of giving company cars to co-workers as part of a little salary because it's less taxed and so on and so forth. Now, a company can decide like, okay, one of the activities of my commercial people is to bring the value to the customers. Well, if we let them do it with a bicycle, it's not going to be very efficient. Certainly not if they have to do like 50 miles. So let's get a car for these people. Now, companies can decide to buy 15 cars for their 15 commercials. They can choose to lease it, to rent it, to go for a full operational leasing, meaning that the winter tires will be put on by the service provider. In case of failure, a new car will be provided automatically, the full Monty. And so I know companies who say, no, we buy our cars and we manage everything ourselves. But most of the companies say, why would we buy it? Buying means that we have to find a huge amount of money. It's capital expenditure. Put it on the table and get 15 cars, and then we have them. We have to write them off in our accounting. But it's more profitable to lease them or to rent them. It's operational expenditure. Now, from a tax point of view, from what they call in economy EBITDA, so it's the value of a company at the end of the year when taxes and everything has been deduced, it's much more interesting to lease the cars than to buy them. Now, this analogy, you can transfer it onto compute power. Is it still interesting to invest hundreds of thousands of euros or pounds or whatever in hardware if there is an alternative where you can rent it on a monthly basis, on a pay-as-you-go basis? You need a lot, you activate a lot. You don't need a lot, you activate less. Or you reallocate what you have. This is, by the way, what Amazon, one of Microsoft's competitors, at the time did. The initial cloud services at Amazon were based on the fact that they had a huge infrastructure for their Amazon commercial activities that are seasonal. So sometimes these servers were overloaded and sometimes just 10% was used. And then at Amazon they said, wait a minute, we have got all this compute power in data centers, mainly in the US. Wouldn't it be a good idea to, when we don't use them, that we rent them out to people who need compute power? And so the Amazon Web Services were born. And they have grown into a leading market position at this moment, staying relatively stable as compared to Microsoft, more or less on parity when it comes to services, when it comes to what it does and how it does it. Price level, also more or less the same. Differences would mainly be in the fact that Microsoft has its data centers more widely spread. So if I'm a customer and my value, it's important that all of my data is kept within the borders of the country or within the borders of a certain region, it might be advisable to go for Microsoft cloud solutions in the Azure world rather than to choose Amazon. Even if Amazon in some points may be differently priced in a beneficial way. So these are all choices that we can make. And these are also the topics that we can discuss with customers. And we are going to get more into them as we move. But maybe just this one, and I'm a little bit too fast. This is the one that I would like to zoom in a little bit. So what we have here is actually the Microsoft house, and Azure is mainly located in these areas here. It's infrastructure as a service. So it means that one of the most known services offered by Azure is, well, you have a physical server and you want to virtualize it, launch a virtual machine in Azure, and you can start working. Then, of course, you have this server. You want to build something on that server. You would need platform as a service. These are all components, which we are going to discover in a second, that will help to build something. Microsoft also built a lot of things, and they call it software as a service. They used platform elements like SharePoint, SQL, Office, etc. And they made a solution that is called Microsoft 365, and they sell it as a service. And then there are a number of things in Azure that will help you to manage users, that will help you to manage applications, the devices that these users will be using, and the data that these users will manage. So this is all stuff that used to be done on-premise. So, and when I say on-premise, I mean within the four walls of a company, that will now be gradually more and more lifted and shifted to the cloud. And the final purpose, and you may or may not know, but I deliver, I think on a weekly basis, up to 5-6 presentations on this kind of things to end users and to business decision makers. And I like to ask them, if you look at your company, on a scale of 10, how important is it for you to be able to provide an uninterrupted user experience that is very agile, so that allows you to adapt to changing situations? Think about the pandemic, which was a huge, dramatic change all of a sudden, in which your users can be ultimately productive in a very secure environment that is driven by AI. Most scores that people give are like 8, 9, and 10. It is absolutely critical for everybody that they can have that they can offer that to their users. Well, in order to do it, it's important to choose the right resources to be able to provide that. And these resources, if we look at them from a typical on-prem context, and you will definitely recognize things that you are currently selling. Imagine tomorrow I start a company and I don't want to go in the cloud, I just want to buy everything myself. So what will I be ordering? I will probably be ordering server hardware. So the servers, maybe I go for Dell, maybe I go for HP, I don't know, but I need servers. I'm going to look out for the pricing. I will also need storage systems, because these servers may come with some disks in it, but I will need more disks, and I will need to configure these disks in structures that make them really well operational. Now, this server in itself is interesting, but I will also need software and licenses. It could be Linux, could be Windows, it could be database software, SQL or Oracle. Maybe I want some enterprise resourcing functionality. Maybe I want to run some CRM, and so on and so forth. And I will also need licenses for each of my users, for each of these server licenses, so that they can access these services. So imagine already the work that I will be spending in laying out the map of what do I need? Am I compliant? Will I not get in trouble with the software, with the business software lines when they come and check whether I have everything? I will also need network components, because this server will be running maybe somewhere in my basement in a private data center, and it needs to be connected to the whole range of users and machines. And these users will be using workstations. And of course, within my basement, where I will put my data center, I will need to provide redundancy, not only a second server for backup, but also power redundancy. If power failures, it might be useful to have my server still up and running for 20 minutes with UPSs or similar things. It needs to be cooled, and probably I would also prefer to have some physical security measures. Maybe cameras, maybe badging systems, because you don't want anyone to get in and out of your data center at any moment. That might be very critical. And then, of course, it needs to be maintained and supported, and of course, have everything in redundancy. And maybe I would also like to have a telephony system added onto that with maybe a third party. So you can already imagine, while maybe you're a bit confused while I'll tell this, but that's exactly the feeling that we may have when we are in this scenario. It's a lot of puzzling. It's a lot of putting things together. It takes a lot of time, because before all this is operational, well, we may be spending weeks, maybe months before it's all installed, before it's all delivered, and so on and so forth. So it means that, in a sense, I could ask myself now, is it still useful to have all this on-prem? And the things that I do have on-premise, when they are end of life, will I renew them, or wouldn't it be more advisable to take them into the cloud? In the end, most companies end up with hybrid infrastructures, meaning they put some of the workload in Azure and they keep some of the things on-prem. So you would also need a management environment that allows you to manage both what you have at the office, and to simplify it, and what you have in Azure or in the cloud. Now, these are all business concerns. These are all decision-making concerns, where once we have got a clear picture, we can go to the shelf in the store and have a look at what ingredients we will be needing to do that. Now, if you see this image, who feels like comfortable and says, oh, this is, I know that, I have maybe done the Azure exam, the 900 exam, or anything. For whom, and you can use the chat to reply, or you can use your voice to reply. Who would feel very comfortable to talk about this to a customer? And you can say, I would, or I wouldn't. So use the chat window, and don't be ashamed. What happens here stays here. So, so we got William who says no, Laura who says no, not yet. Radim, okay. Bethan also, I wouldn't. Nope. Okay, well, for me that's good news, because it means that it will be relevant what we are sharing. And don't panic. It's not a technical training. We're not going to get lost into all the details, but we're just going to run over them and start always from a business point of view, because in the end, we are not going to ask our customer like, hey, have you considered IoT services in Azure? They will probably say, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Or no, we haven't. Or maybe find an excuse not to get into detail, and you will feel comfortable, probably they didn't. What we are going to ask is business-wise, is business-related. And then we will map it back to Azure. Fortunately, Bechtel has a lot of Azure specialists, so you can, once the next stage is activated, you can pass it on to a pre-sale specialist who will then know all the ins and outs. But let's now take our shopping cart. Imagine that we walk through the Azure shelves within our preferred shopping mall, and we just have a look at the products. Like, what's this? You take the product, you have a look at it. What can I do with it? What does it serve? And you put it back. So next time someone says, hey, I would like to cook a spaghetti carbonara, you can say, look, I don't know much about bacon, but I know you need bacon. I'm not an egg specialist, but I know you need eggs. And I know you need cheese, and I know you need pasta. And I also know that within that store you can find it. Now, how to put it all together, I'll connect you to my pre-sale specialist who can help you and make sure that your carbonara is made maybe in such a way that you can add some salad later on, and that you can maybe add some more ingredients as you are eating, and maybe we can provide a good wine that goes with it, and maybe a good aperitif, and so on and so forth, so you make it scalable. So that's what we're going to do. And let's maybe use this picture. There's also another one. maybe I'm going to start with this one, not because to run through all the cases, but look at the top here. You see? So what we see here is identity. we see security, we see management of, and let me read it, and production. We see compute power, we see advanced compute power, we see links to data management, to advanced data management, and we also find things like development, networking, and so on. So if we go into the Azure store and we watch the shelf, you will see that everything is organized, all the ingredients are organized on certain areas within the shelf. And one of the first ones that might be interesting for us is the one that we see at the bottom, and that is the compute and the storage. So maybe they will also be in the bottom of the shelves, and you will find virtual servers. Now, questions here would be how much workloads, how much applications, how much hardware do you still run on-prem? What is the advantage of doing it on-prem? What works well? And you let the customer list maybe, oh yeah, we control it, we see it, we manage it. For data reasons, we want to keep it on-prem. Next question could be, and you can write them down, if there would be one thing that could be improved in the way you work now, what would it be? And maybe it could be, well, we want less concerns about it. We would like to increase the security. Maybe there will be input about scalability. Sometimes we are just using all of the resources of that server and the system slow down. And on other moments, the server is running and it costs money, but it doesn't do anything. So these are the signals that we will be looking out for. And then the first and most known thing in Azure is virtual servers. So you would say like, okay, what are you running on that server? And is it possible to take it out there and put it on a virtual machine in Azure? And then your users, instead of connecting onto that server that runs at your place, they will be connecting onto a server that runs in the Microsoft data center. Everything else remains exactly the same. You can choose the speed, you can choose the performance, you can choose the computer that you want. You want a big server, you want a small server. You can even choose the technology that you want to use. And you see over here like containers. Maybe some of you have heard about Kubernetes. These are all like fashionable terms that indicate certain technologies. Again, from a business point of view, right? I'm running a package, a software to take care of my customers. And that software is now running on Windows and has been developed for Windows. And then maybe a couple of years later, there is this new version of Windows and they say like, well, all software that has been developed for ancient operating systems will no longer be supported. That's one scenario. Or I'm running software and at one given moment in time I say, maybe I would like to move that to Azure, that piece of software. Or maybe we need to update a minor item in the software without embarrassing everything else that runs in the software. So it could be interesting not to have one huge software package, but to have different building blocks that all together form the software. You need to manage that. Well, that's where containers and where Kubernetes come in. They split up large applications into smaller applications, or at least they don't do it with existing ones, but you can program. Programmers will use it that way. And you will need a platform to be able to manage this. And that's where Azure comes in. So, but let's keep it simple. I have 2 Windows servers. I want a virtual machine. I have 1 Linux server. I also want to put it in the cloud. And I was using VMware. I know a lot about VMware. Now, VMware has been acquired by another company, Price Impact, Solution Impact. So it might be unclear where it is going. But for the upcoming weeks, I would like to still keep on using VMware. And then later on, we can transfer it to Microsoft's virtual solution, which is Hyper-V. Okay, so let's activate the servers here. We need storage. So because our Windows servers will maybe store files or maybe databases. So I will also need not to put in a hard disk in my server, but to activate virtual hard disks in the cloud, in Azure. So I will find all kinds of storage. And the choice that I will make here is based on what do I want to do with it. If it is to put large volumes of Word documents, and I'm keeping it intentionally simple, that I will be consulting once every day, and it doesn't matter if I have to wait 1 minute or 10 seconds, I will go for cheap, not very performant disks. If, on the other hand, I am doing transactions in a bank and every millisecond counts, then I will probably go for high performant premium storage. Okay? Most important thing is, what is it that you want to do? Well, within the shelves, we got the service to activate it. But then I have my servers and I have my storage, and I'm working from home and say, hey, I'm going to use the application. Of course, I need to find it. You know, my computer will connect onto the internet. Probably the internet will find its way to that server, and then I need to be able to access that server. So in order to do that, I will need networking. Just as I do on-prem, remember client-server networks, it's exactly the same thing in the cloud. But it's virtual. So it's a virtual network that comes with a whole series of additional services to manage the network, to manage the traffic, to make sure that the critical operations are going rapidly, the less critical don't get priority. I can even choose to have my own private connection to my servers using Express Route. It's my private connection from where I am to the Microsoft data center. And I will also provide gateways, and gateways are indeed the entry points to my server. Now, technical people will know what this is all about. Business people will just want to know, okay, so you have everything to make sure that when I put that server on-prem into the cloud, we will find it with ease and in a secured way. Yes, we do. And will we have the performance that we need? Yes, you will. What kind of performance do you expect? Really premium and high, then you will go for high-end servers, you will go for premium storage, and you will probably choose something like Express Route, which is your dedicated highway to the Azure center. If you're just a normal business with normal requirements, you may choose for normal servers, average storage, and just a traditional network setup. If your business changes, grows, shrinks, you can always adapt it on the run, which is difficult when you are on premise. So that would be the infrastructure part that, of course, from a Microsoft point of view is rolled out. Meanwhile, this is a little bit obsolete. There are much more data centers right now and much more regions. But it means that for our purposes, for instance, Europe has mainly Amsterdam and Dublin as the two centers where everything is running. But there is an increasing number of new data centers. Belgium is going to get one. France has several ones. In Spain, they are building data centers. Germany is being equipped with data centers. So it's interesting to see that where you want your virtual machines to run becomes, well, also a choice. A choice that you will make depending on maybe compliancy obligations. I'm thinking of GDPR, the general directive on how to deal with personal and private data from your customers. Where does it need to be stored? What can you do with it? Well, this can determine a little bit whether you want to have your data in the US or in preferably in Europe. And this is also an interesting argument to remember when people say, yeah, I know about cloud computing and I've been watching the offering of Amazon and they are a lot cheaper. Well, for certain things they are, but you will have difficulties in being compliant with them with regard to where your infrastructure is located. Most of their data centers are not regional, so it's a consideration to take into account. Of course, there's a third player, Google. They all have their advantages. I think Google would be very good for big companies who are really into huge amounts of data that need to be analyzed with maybe some artificial intelligence on top of it. That's where Google really outperforms everybody at this moment. Amazon would be a good player if inside or outside you do not use Microsoft at all. You don't use Office, you use a third-party tool, you have nothing to do with Microsoft, then probably it would be a good thing. But the moment you hear that your customer is using Microsoft 365, Office 365, or anything that refers to Microsoft, then Azure is definitely the best choice. Because it's all close together, because it's all within one environment. And so the things that I'm sharing with you now are also things that I share with business people when we talk about cloud computing and the value of Microsoft within that area. So it's not only to inform you, but you can literally make your own story out of what I'm telling and just use it in conversations. Now imagine a customer who is already on Microsoft 365. Okay, so they use Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, Exchange, etc. As you all do. When you connect, you need authentication, so your email address, and you need a password. We agree? And you probably will also use multi-factor authentication, don't you? Where is that handled? Where is that MFA? Where is your identity stored? Where is your password stored? Where is this whole thing that manages you as a user? Where does that happen? Well, you may have guessed it. It happens over here in Azure. It's no longer called Azure Active Directory. Today it is called Entra, as you may have heard or know. Entra, E-N-T-R-A, Entra, is the place where users are managed. So even if you're talking to someone and they order servers and hardware, of course, obviously I can understand it. If that's your business, you will probably see already the commissions and etc. But that's another conversation. And you hear that they are using Microsoft 365, then the conversation can be easily opened. So, how do you manage access to all of these things? Because when your users are in Office 365, they are in the cloud. When they are using your servers, what identity will they use? Is it the same login? Is it a different login? Who handles the multi-factor authentication? Have you considered the possibility to activate conditional access? Security is a very hot topic, as you know. There is this NIS2 regulation coming up at the end of this year and probably rolled out in the following year. So people need to be aware of how do we manage that? How easy is it? How many different players do we use? And what would be the benefit of having it all grouped in one central thing? And that's where identity services come in. And on the other drawing that we saw, which is this one, we see that identity is like the white part. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So the things that we see here are the Entra, the Azure Active Directory. We see everything that has to do with the connectivity. We see multi-factor authentication. We'll see conditional access and a lot of additional services that, again, in our shelf will help that customer to make sure that everything is working correctly. And they can use your services to install it, your knowledge of the pre-sales to make it work. But what we remember here is that most customers already use Azure without even knowing it. That's, I think, an interesting entry point as well. And this is the part they use. Now, I mentioned that most companies will keep stuff on-premise and other stuff in the cloud. Okay, we agree on that. So how do we manage that? Well, let's again go to the other side of our shelf here. And here we find something that is called hybrid operations. Hybrid refers to you have stuff on different locations, not all at Microsoft, and you need to manage it. Well, you will need to manage your identities. You will need to manage backup. You will need to manage maybe site recovery on different sites. You may need to manage storage in different areas so that your users have the impression that they are working on one big thing, whereas reality is actually a lot of small things that are spread out over a lot of locations, but for the user it shouldn't make any difference, right? So that's the hybrid operations part of the shelf. And when you go and look here, you will find everything you need to make sure that whatever you choose to roll out, it's well connected, it's a smooth experience for your customers and your users, and it is managed within the Azure environment, which also means that if you start expanding using more building blocks, you already start from a well-integrated basis. Okay, that's a very important thing too. Certainly now that we are at the verge of being AI-driven more and more, I still feel some reluctancy with regard to Copilot. People want to make sure it's secure, etc. But if they roll it out and they are already in that kind of cloud environment managed by Microsoft, then chances are that they will be up and running in a secure way much faster than they would. So, what have we seen so far in Azure? Everything you need to virtualize your machines, to store your data, to make a network and make everything findable and traceable in a secure way. We also managed our users over here from a security and management point of view. And if our customer is also still having stuff on other locations, we have on the shelf plenty of services that will help to make sure that it's all interconnected. And basically that's all you need to be able to work. Now, if we look at Microsoft 365, Microsoft 365 uses virtual computers. It uses storage. We call it OneDrive and SharePoint, but basically it's a virtual server where we can store our data. And it uses a virtual network to make sure that when I log in, I'm in my tenant, and when you log in, you're in your tenant, and they're completely separated. My identity is managed over here. And well, within Microsoft 365, I'm not going to use a lot of hybrid operations, but I may want to say to my user, look, you're in HR, you are using a third-party tool to manage salaries and hiring, etc. You know what? When you start Office 365, you will log in with your Office 365 email address, and that will also directly give you access to your HR environment. So it's single sign-on. That would be managed over here by an Azure service, and it would provide ease of use. So translate this back into a question, maybe, how many logins do you use today? How easy is it for your users to connect onto the different applications that they use? How do you manage all the passwords, all the user IDs? How do you manage the security between different services? Just to know, to listen what people say. Always knowing in the back of your head, Azure has got solutions to provide for this. And then we have the middle part. Now I'll let you choose one of the things that you may want to deep dive in. You can use the chats and just say like, I'm seeing something called web and mobile or data or developers. And we can just have a brief look at what would be in there or what would it mean. Who will launch the first curiosity request, either by voice or by chat? So pick one of the shelves, and I will be the department guy who will briefly run over what's on the shelf. Anyone? It's very quiet on the other side. Are you still there? Hello?
And can you repeat what you want us to do?
Well, just say which of these building blocks in the middle you just want to have a quick look at.
Oh, okay.
You can choose. I can run over them one by one, but it might be interesting if you say like, okay, maybe let's start with this one.
Integration.
Integration. That's the one over here. Integration would be the answer to questions like, how many business applications do you use? So typically line of business applications, ERP, CRM, production stuff, etc. And how well are they interconnected? I'm not sure if you are familiar with what Microsoft calls the data feedback loop. So it means that if something in production needs to be or happens, are we able as an organization to use that information in other areas of our company? If we get customer feedback, how much time does it take to be translated into production? If we get employee feedback, how much time does it take to integrate that feedback into other systems? And that's where the integration components come in. They provide services to connect different applications and make data more usable by, well, doing, for instance, these storage queues, or this is the most familiar one, the BizTalk services. Let business talk to each other. This is integration, both fully in the cloud or hybrid. That's the first one. Anyone else? Which one would you like to discover now? And it will be all approximately as briefly as the integration one, just to give you a little...
You run over data.
The data, this one over here. Okay, so what we have here is storage below. So this you could see as the hardware that you would need to store information. And the data that we see over here are the types of databases and data services that you need to do something with that data. So the most known one in business is SQL. So SQL service, SQL database. In Microsoft, in Azure, it's called the SQL service. This is like a database, a SQL database that can be used to manage structured data. Now, for your information, SharePoint, for instance, runs on a SQL database. And SharePoint is like data with dates and authors and other items. We see it as a list in a browser, but actually it's a SQL service. The SQL warehouses would be a lot of SQL servers altogether. The document databases would be specific databases to manage huge quantities of documents. What else do we see? Tables. Tables are another format of storing information. Let's say that you have a warehouse where you scan the stock and the availability. You may want to put that in a table. You may want to put that in a SQL database. Briefly, it's all the kinds of services that you have that will be installed on this storage, managed by compute power, obviously, to manage your data. And the questions here is, what kind of data do you use? What kind of software do you use? SQL will be the most familiar one, and the others are very specific. That's the data part. You will also see some over there, for instance, but I don't think it's on the slide here. Data lakes are also in there. And if we look at artificial intelligence, and that brings, Laura says, like analytics and IoT, that would be the interesting sequel to what I'm saying. Today, everybody is like thinking about how can we use artificial intelligence, not only in a generative way like ChatGPT and Copilot, but also in a what we call a narrow way, just to do one specific thing very well. Let's say that we have got customer data, we have got feedback from via websites, we got production data, we got whole assortment of data. One comes in as a PDF, one comes in as a series of ones and zeros, one come in as a series of figures, so different formats. And we would like to run some AI algorithms on it, maybe to get more insights in how to better serve the customer, how to better produce our products, etc. Now, if it would be similar data, we could say, well, all the data that we gather fit into a database type SQL, so let's use SQL. But with IoT and analytics, it's different. You may want to use what is called a data lake, and that's another Azure service. And imagine it like a lake, and you just pour your data in it, no matter what it is. And the data lake service, together with the analytics and Internet of Things services, will help you to get something insightful out of that data. Using, for instance, Hadoop Insight. Hadoop is a third party, and they developed algorithms to make useful insights in a wide range of data. You will also find machine learning over here, very up to date today. And machine learning is everything that we do today with artificial intelligence requires machine learning, because it's more artificial than it is intelligent in the AI world. So if I have data and I want my computer to make forecasts, I need to train the computer on what data means what and how to make the forecasts in order to have the forecasts to be correct. You all had probably experiences where you asked something to ChatGPT and the answer you got was like, no, this is really not what I have been asking for. Well, while saying to ChatGPT this was not a correct answer, you have trained ChatGPT, you have helped them to train their model, and behind the screens there is machine learning going on. So companies who say, look, ChatGPT is good, but it's public, we want to use our own machine learning for a specific application, well, within Azure, you will find all the services that you need to start building your own ChatGPT, your own Copilot, your own AI thing, which will of course trigger a lot of activities and a lot of interactions. And there you have got an event hub, for instance, where it all comes together and it's distributed. Data may be floating in and floating out. That's where we have these stream services to make sure that when data comes in and it needs to be processed rapidly, well, that it does not stay there in a queue and say like, oh, wait a minute. No, it's streaming in and out. So these are all the tools within analytics and IoT. Questions here could be, are you familiar with Internet of Things? Do you use Internet of Things technology already? Where are you with regard to artificial intelligence? How much data would you have today in your company that you are not using because you don't have the tools to analyze it? And there is a lot of information people don't use. And if they would start using it, they would come out with conclusions and with insights that may well help grow their business. So how important is it for you that your business grows? What drives the growth of your business? It's a data-driven economy today. It's all about data. The more data you have, the richer you are. But then what you do with that data? That's data services and analytics and IoT. Well, gradually moving in again. I'm just going to launch a little poll. So if you find it on your screen, how are you feeling after part 1? Good, I see. Okay, let's see how the world cloud builds up. We can see it on screen. Smarter, happy, happy, that's nice, yeah. Informed. Enlightened. Amazing what Azure can do to a human being, isn't it? So I'll leave the poll open for those arriving. So, as I said, we are just flirting a little bit with a lot of content about what Azure is. I'll leave you in smaller groups just to give it a place in your world, and we'll see names not recorded, results shared. Okay, good. I see this poll coming up. All right. What was I saying? Yes, so that there is a lot going on in that Azure environment. Meanwhile, I just added a more recent slide to it. But again, it's not that much about knowing every little thing. It's more about knowing the big challenges and how to work with it. So let me give you another story. A couple of weeks ago, I received on my phone a WhatsApp from a guy I think last time I saw him was 10 years ago. And he says, like, I remember you are a SharePoint specialist. I don't know where he got the idea because I'm in no way SharePoint specialist, but I do give functional trainings on SharePoint. And he shows me a message and he says, I want to publish some pages on my SharePoint for my users. And I get this CDN error, Content Delivery Network. Can you help me? Of course, what I did is probably what you meanwhile also do, and if not, do it. I went to Copilot. I said, this is the context, this is the issue, what could be the problem, how can we solve it? So Copilot gave me an answer, I sent it back, and I think the day after the guy replied, said, thank you, it worked. I was not even knowing what happened, but I remember CDN, you see it over here, Content Delivery Network, and it has got to do with let's say a customer who wants to publish pages on their website with training videos, with media information, multimedia, with interactivity. Well, they might take a lot of benefits from these services within Azure in order to give this smooth experience to customers. And so all of a sudden, media and CDN for me became very relevant, even though I don't use it myself. I would not even know where to switch it on. But then Copilot gave me a nice answer with 2 PowerShell commands. I didn't even know what they were about, but apparently it worked for the person that was asking the question. And the same goes for, well, in another stage, like over here we see application platforms. You know, a lot of companies are focusing today on automating processes. Okay, so automating processes in the sense that things that happen manually would be automated, either with an application on a phone, with an application on a tablet, with any sort of automative tool. Now, you may be familiar with Power Apps or Power Automate in the Microsoft 365 world. These are what we call low-code, no-code tools to make applications and to optimize processes. Not that much used by an average user, but IT kind of likes it. But most of them want still to code. And indeed, if you would want to make a complex application, let me give you a little example. One of the companies I was visiting recently to talk about this topic, they are in selling of large quantities of fruit, you know, fruit and vegetables. So just imagine, go with me in this story. Large trucks filled with apples and pears and bananas arrive at their warehouses, are stored in cool rooms, And then there's this inspector walking around, yeah, I'm not joking, with a sheet of paper, a pre-printed form, doing the quality control, you know? So he's there and said, okay, this is the quality. He takes the form, he puts it in a tray of an assistant who at the end of the day takes all the forms, a computer, and starts introducing all the quality measurements. Result is that only the day after they are able to share this information, and they lose a lot of time, a lot of inaccuracies while copying, because not all handwriting is as easy to recognize as we would want it to be. So what they said is, we would like our inspectors with a tablet or a smartphone to get into the warehouse, see a QR code for that specific warehouse, scan the code, open their smartphone, fill in all the details, push the submit button, and that data should then go into, well, other parts over here and over here to be analyzed, to be shared, and to be made insightful and reusable. Can we do that? So the first thing we did, we used Power Applications, so the no-code tool, and we developed, like, I think in 1 hour, an application that allowed them to do that. But of course, the application was not yet integrated with all of the other services here that were very useful as well, the AI service, the analytics service, and the data. And then the developers came in and they say, you know what, we are going to develop code, the application now more in detail to integrate it and make it fully secure. So starting from a simple operation that was time consuming, prone to a lot of errors, they moved into an application that was developed quite rapidly because all the developer tools were within reach of hand. They just went into Azure, they said, we need this, we need that, we need Visual Basic, we need C#, click, click, click. And like 5 minutes later, the developers were having fun coding the program. And then they launched a few other services in Azure, and now they can use that data in a much richer way. They have less discussions after 2 or 3 weeks when the fruits are then sent to local department stores about the quality, because everything is there and it's precise. It's again a nice example of how actually business requirements, which we talked about, and over here it was, how can we make sure that the value that we deliver, which is store fruit and vegetables and make sure that they leave the warehouse in the same condition as they entered, how can we find resources that will allow us to augment and increase the value of this? And then you start puzzling. So they went into the Azure warehouse and say, what do we need? Yeah, some application services. It will be on a web interface. We need to connect it with data. We need to connect it with this. And then they started doing their thing. The good thing is they already work in Microsoft 365. So all the user identities, they already had them. It was not like another week of work to say who has access, who does not have access. They were already using SharePoint and lists in SharePoint. So they were able to send some of that data automatically to these kinds of databases. They already had SQL running for something. So it was all there. So if someone is already on Microsoft 365, the bridge to Azure is quite a small bridge. And it's all about how satisfied are you with the way things happen now? And if there would be one thing that you would accelerate and that would have a lot of added value on your revenue, what would it be? Take faster decisions, have more data available, have more insights available, save on processes that are time consuming to help our customers be served better. These are all like considerations to be made by the ones who will in the end finance it. We may be talking with IT people or with IT responsible people, both in public, private sector. These are the ones that are architecting the thing. But they also have to kind of get the money. So they need another story, because if I, as an IT director, would go to my CEO and say, hey, I've had this interesting thing about Azure, and they were talking about how we can use data lakes to build integrated services using BizTalk. You can imagine the CEO would say, like, okay, he may not convince me, but he definitely confused me. Probably he knows what he's talking about, but it's a lot of money. I don't see the value. So we also need to help these people to translate that. And one question I frequently ask when I talk to technical people is just, whom will you be sharing this story with? Who provides you with the budget? Do they know about IT? Probably not. Maybe the CFO, maybe the purchase responsible, maybe the CEO, it doesn't matter. And do you feel able, or can you use additional inspiration to translate this part of technology into something that they will understand and that will give them, like, wow, this feeling, we want this, we need this, here's the budget, let's do it. So these are the bridges that we increasingly have to make when talking about more complex things like these ones. And the challenges that, well, Azure will deal with are mainly flexibility, cost efficiency, agility, better decisions, faster operations, more scalable operations, and more agility when the economy changes. And there, I still use it, even though it's like over 3 years ago. The pandemic is like an ideal opening to start a conversation. How did you manage? All of a sudden, you had this huge on-premise infrastructure that was no longer used because we all had to shut down, we all had to stay home, there was quarantine. So what happened with that infrastructure? Imagine you would be in Azure and you would only need 10% of your capacity. Well, you just close the 90% that is there. You don't pay for it for the time. You just leave the critical operations on, and off we are. I see, Laura, you raise a hand.
Sorry, that was an accident.
Okay, no, maybe you had a question or some input or something. So always feel free to just interrupt or ask anything. Is what I'm sharing with you, if you look at your business, do you feel this is relevant? Do you already see opportunities where you can say, maybe this is something I can share with one of my customers?
Yeah, I think it's all relevant because all of our customers are buying some type of Azure, whether it's Azure or AWS.
Mm-hmm.
So every customer will be looking at this, whether it's on-prem, hybrid, or in the cloud. So definitely all relevant.
Yeah. And as you say, they're all already looking for it, and they know that there's AWS, they know that there's Azure, they know that there's Google. They know that they can also go into smaller players, like in France there's OVS, which is mainly focused on virtual machines and virtual servers. So they have a lot of choice, and they also have a lot of choice in partnering. With whom am I going to do it? Am I going to use Bechtel? Am I going to use any other one? So this is where we come in. What is the story that we will tell? What are the questions that we will ask to ignite a process within their heads? Like, I was thinking about Azure, about Amazon, but now that that William or whoever talked and asked me, yeah, maybe I should start thinking about other things. So we open up the scenarios. We do what Bob, my accountant's new IT partner, is doing successfully. Stealing away customers from other partners who don't do it that way, who are still in the reactive mode. Who say like, oh, you ordered this, I'll activate it, you'll have it in 1 day or in a week, and then stop. What we will do is, whatever conversation takes place, whether it's someone who just bought 10 firewalls, just bought one or the other service, activated a few licenses, whatever they buy, at the end of every conversation, we want to have one question ready, like one question where we could say like, hey, this is going to maybe open up the story. Now, if I would ask you, what would that question be? What would it be? And let me just get into the polls. So let's see where I am with the polls. Da-da-da-dum. Now, I'm just gonna, just give me a second. I'm going to just slightly change the question and then leave you with a few answers that you can give. So stay close, and the question will be, what are good ways to segue the conversation into Azure? Okay, so we are going to make a word cloud of this. So for the non-native English, segue means to drive the conversation into the topic of Azure. Like, for instance, someone just bought a few things, and what we want to know is, hey, where are you with regard to this kind of thing? Or how does what you just ordered fit into your IT strategy? Or anything else. So I'm inviting you to think of questions that would be good, that would be interesting, just to bridge the conversation into the topic of Azure. Meanwhile, I'm also going to show the results on screen so we can walk over them. So, and you can already start inventing questions or ways. So you just imagine I'm the customer, I just placed an order for anything you can imagine. How would you ignite that little curiosity within me to know more about Azure, or to start a conversation on Azure? And we will get the results on screen as we speak. So you can use the form if you want. I'm going to put that one a little. Yeah, so what services do you currently have in the cloud? Excellent. So just look at their level of maturity. And then also try and figure out what is working fine, what is not working fine, what is useful, what are the things that you adore, what are the things that you maybe want to see differently. Okay. What is your cloud strategy? Indeed, it's also a very interesting question. Just curious, what are you planning to do in the cloud? What's your strategy? Enhancing digital capabilities. Have you considered the benefits of Azure Cloud Services? Yep, absolutely. How do you manage your licenses? I like that one too. How do you currently manage your licenses? Because in the whole Azure thing, it's more about subscriptions, less about licenses. So it's definitely helpful to ask that as a question. Does this purchase have any impact on your cloud strategy? Oh yeah, that's a good one too. You just bought something. How does that fit or impact your moves to the cloud? And then more outside Azure, we could also ask questions about, I'm just very curious, but what makes a decision in your company a good decision? Is it data? Is it the people? Or is it something else? And then we will listen. Oh yeah, it's definitely data. And then we can say like, okay, how do you manage that data today? How well does that work? Over here, the questions like what currently works well for you within your cloud strategy? An excellent question again. But as you also see, they're still very focused on the product, the service, and the strategy. So I challenge you to go even beyond that and think about business challenges, about things that may keep the CEO awake, and that are, you could imagine that you're in your helicopter and you're flying over the company, and you see like, okay, oh yeah, that CEO, what keeps that guy or girl definitely awake is at the end of each quarter, the board of directors, the stakeholders, and then that person who has to say like, okay, we did well, we did average, or we did less. So what makes, for instance, your CEO extremely happy when he can address the stakeholders? Well, that the business is good. How well is the business running now? You don't have to give me insights, but what are the drivers to make your business thrive? And then as you go from that more broad view, you go down into one specific topic with your helicopter, and off you are to well, have more insights. Has your cloud strategy impacted your decisions on this purchase? Yeah, absolutely. And these are, again, very close to the conversation that is ongoing, but it's an excellent question just to slowly bridge into the theme. Anyone else? The last one to wrap this one up. At this moment, we're all exhausted. Okay, but it's good. It's fine. It's I like the input. So just bear in mind, also go beyond the pure cloud strategy and also try to understand as much as possible the business reality of the customer and ask some questions about that business reality to ignite again the curiosity and maybe then map what you hear back into value for regarded to Azure. Now, we are then within the topic of Azure, of course. I will just leave you now maybe 5 minutes. I will distribute you in some smaller groups, and I would like you to just discuss between you about, if I have 1 minute to explain the value of moving workloads to Azure, how would I do that? What would be a good pitch to do that? So you will now be distributed in only 3 rooms, so you will see with whom you are. I deliberately let the teams do the distribution, and I will hop around and just maybe answer a few questions if you have any in the different rooms. So the purpose is, with what you know now, how would you talk in 1 line, in 3 lines, in 1 minute? How would you convince someone that it's valuable to move to Azure and maybe not to Amazon, or maybe not remain on premise? Good.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. Everybody's still alive and kicking?
We're good.
Yeah, fine. Here as well. Okay, so what, let's see, we are already 11 back in here. Good. So while visiting the rooms, I heard indeed CAPEX, OPEX, and so the financial formula, flexibility of the platform, the pay-as-you-go. They all have this in common. Whether you talk AWS, Google, or Azure, it's all about paying as you go. And indeed, when you compare Azure to Amazon, some people have the tendency to think that Azure is more expensive. So that will be a consideration they make. From a vocabulary point of view, I always use another vocabulary. I say, look, it may well be that Azure is priced differently, which is a different way of saying it's more expensive. It's differently priced. It comes to the market at a different price, And let me explain a little bit why that is, about the value then. And then you can segue into the value, which is indeed the integration. You will save on a lot of items when you are already in the Microsoft world. It's well integrated. And another reflection that might be an interesting one is the idea that if you look at what Europe is now imposing in terms of security, NIS2, for instance, is one of them. It means that if I am a company, one of the 30,000 in Belgium then that will be subjected to that new law, one of the things that I need to take care of is that everybody in the supply chain of my company, and that could be a small IT provider, that could be the guy who is managing my car transactions or whatever, everybody within that supply chain also needs to be compliant. Now, one of the advantages of moving to Azure is that is, compared to the other ones, the most complete with regard to regularly conformity. GDPR, it's way too far. You probably have seen those lists published by Microsoft. It's full of symbols and HPA, security, privacy, legal norms, privacy norms, business standards that data and infrastructure need to correspond to. So if I'm doing public tenders as a smaller company, or if I have a few bigger customers who will increasingly be forced into making sure that their suppliers are also compliant, then my story towards them will be easier if I can tell them, look, we use Microsoft 365 and everything else is virtualized in Azure. Already a lot of green checks are marked. It's like, okay, oh, you're in Azure, good. We know that by design you are compliant. So, oof. Are you using Microsoft 365? We know that by design you are more compliant than other alternatives. So that's also an interesting value component within the Azure stack of products. Any other things you came up with in the groups? No, so I put them on a few slides. We're not going to walk through all the slides, but just to say that within the handouts you will find some additional things, but you know, scalability, flexibility, security, compliance, the one I was just talking about, and then also the innovative part. Look, people who are currently working already in Azure and in Microsoft 365 have a major advantage to launch artificial intelligence and use it actively in their companies than companies who are still on-prem. They are light years behind. And if you look at the speed, the amazing speed at which artificial intelligence is finding its way to companies and to users, I, as a business owner, I would be at least a little bit worried about, when and where can we use it? Oh, you still have all your files on a server within your, that's going to be tricky. It's going to be a lot of development, it's going to be a lot of blah, blah, blah. So just start moving to the cloud, and then the door to AI opens up. That's another significant value argument of just moving to the cloud. And then if you want to use decent AI tools, you all know that Microsoft and OpenAI are, well, very good friends. They exchange technology. OpenAI is at this point really doing very, very well with tangible deliverables in the field of artificial intelligence. Google is working hard. Amazon is also working hard. We hear them less. We see them less. What they come out with is very niche. What I want as a business owner is stuff that helps me to get intelligent data, insights, see relations where I would not see them. Well, the first step is make sure you're all cloudified, and from that cloud onwards you can start building your AI solution stack, starting with as a service, Copilot, up to building your own components, using the items that we have seen on one of the slides, which are the intelligence, it's this part here, everything that has to do with AI, the cognitive services, the chatbot services, the machine learning studio. It's all there. You just need a few developers who know about Python and about some other languages, and they can start playing around here. So it's absolutely fabulous. So as a summary, and without wanting to offend customers, I would say, if today it's your ambition to be innovative, to take good decisions, to provide secure working environment, to make sure that you will also use artificial intelligence in the way you operate with one target, that is to keep your customers, to keep your employees motivated and give them the right tools, and to grow your business. If these are things that you want from a business point of view, and you are not yet in the cloud, and with regard to Microsoft, not yet in Azure, I'm very sorry, but you will be lacking behind. And if you know that other companies will not be lagging behind, what will that do to your competitive position? Okay, if I'm in a niche market and I do something that only 5 companies do, and it's not really technology intensive, no problem. But if I'm a mainstream supplier of services or products, and half of my company is carried by technology to process my orders, make my invoices, analyze my customer behavior, then I can lose very, very, very rapidly. If you know that, for instance, ChatGPT took only 1 month to achieve 100 million users, never seen before, never before. So as a company owner, I would say, that, okay, or you can put your head in the sand and say, like, I haven't seen it, I know nothing. But where will that bring you? So these are the kind of nice conversations. They don't have to last 10 minutes, but just like when people lay down the phone or get out of a meeting, they say like, that was interesting, that chat with one of you. And they will appreciate you for that. So the value proposition is pretty clear, but of course, and that brings us almost to the end, there will also be objectives, objections, I mean. What would be like worries that people have to move to the cloud? What can you think of? And just to wrap it up, we will do it by voice. Price could be one of them. The concern for price is one I think of. Are there any other concerns you think about?
I'd say level of security.
Yeah.
However, as we've seen today, you could argue once you know about Azure, the level of security is advanced. But obviously, it's like the cloud is well, I know it's not new, but it's a lot newer than on-prem technology. So I guess if you've got maybe an older CTO or IT director, CEO making the decisions, it's better what you know rather than like the new as such.
Absolutely.
Even though, as I say, it's not new,
Yeah.
so it's just like the unknown, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's just taking that leap of faith. But obviously, that's the point of having hybrid. You don't move all of it straight away.
Sure.
You test the waters.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to also bear in mind that hybrid is most of the time the way to go. And you move very slowly, some critical components. But the point you make about security is one you can argument fairly easy. I always think as Microsoft, not as a supplier, but as a reference case. How does a company with 100 data centers spread all over the world, managing petabytes of data, how do they keep that secure? How do they keep that conform all normatives and all regulations in different countries? I don't know, but what I do know is that the way they do it, they integrate it in their cloud solutions, and we can profit from it. So, very interesting indeed. Yeah. Other objections you may think about? Objections or worries? Come on. I'm just opening to wrap things up. Like when people don't really know what to do with Azure, so you have azure.microsoft.com, that's the portal site. Of course, you will find all the products here and a price estimator. So it's a calculator. But there's also scenarios. We've been talking about machine learning and about analytics. So if you say like, I'm a company and I would like to make a sort of a machine learning platform to, well, help my users of a help desk, like when people have questions, they no longer have to call. We have an intelligent system that retrieves the information from all the data that we have, and I can just chat with it. And it will learn from the questions that people ask, and it will fine-tune the answers, and it will find new answers. What do I need? Well, you can go onto the portal and say, like, this will be, if you walk with your cart in the store, you will need to pick out these products. And if you want to know what that would cost, well, let's have a cost estimate, and it will just give you an idea. It's a basic idea. And if people say like, what is that will that be the cost on a monthly basis? Maybe. So it's let's see what it brings up. So this scenario would be like $7,461 per month. Let's put that into the Eurozone. So it would be like 7,000 euro per month. Now, if I can save 2 full-time salaries, I'm already like making money, even with 1 full-time salary. It's not that I'm advocating laying off people, but maybe these people can do more valuable things than just answer questions that could be handled in a different way. And one final remark with regard to the price calculator. If people say, I've been using it and it's pretty expensive, well, it comes out at a certain price. But if you give this in the hands of someone who knows to work with it and to fine-tune it, you will, in general, even cut 20 to 25% of the default budget. Because the budget you see here is based on default parameters that Microsoft says about potential data that will be transvased. You see it's all the details here. And a specialist will say like, oh, no, this is way too much. This we can change, this we can optimize. And your price may probably be like maybe at 6,000 or 5,009. Here we are in a context of quite an advanced scenario. As you see, there's a lot of things going on here. But I think it's interesting. Also, if people say like, can you give me some more details about what is possible? Well, just send them the azure.microsoft.com site, and they will be very happy and thankful that you shared this info with them. So, and other objections. I put all my eggs in one basket. Is it a good idea to put everything in the hands of Microsoft? Well, I say, what would be a bad idea? I like to counter question then. Why would it be a bad idea? If you imagine that you have, metaphors is what I'm looking for, is also a good way to talk about this. Imagine that you have a disease and you have one PhD of whom you know that he's a specialist, that he has got all the knowledge to treat you in the best way. And you have another one where, you don't know, but he's a lot cheaper. Where would you go? I would go for the specialist, honestly speaking. If it was something that would bear on me personally, I would pay the premium price and go to the specialist. Now it's up to you. How important is technology in your company? If you say, doesn't matter, 2 weeks without IT, no problem, we survive, then go for the cheapest you can find. But if you say like, it's kind of a mission critical component, then go for premium services. And then you would be back in the hands of one player, because that's the premium one, and not a collection of less premium players. And so you can still probably think of many other concerns. Again, within the handout, you will find a few things about complexity, about disruption, about scalability, about all kinds of possible questions that may pop up. Like how easy is it to move from what we have to where we want to go to? What is that AI? Is it going to improve our sales processes? Of course it will. How cost effective is it? I integrated one slide where you will find an on-prem and an Azure equivalent with some pricing. The differences are substantial to the advantage of Azure. So it's an interesting thing. But let's be honest, if you go into Microsoft Copilot and you give enough context and you say, like, I have a customer on-premise with this infrastructure, they would like to move to Azure. Just make me a table with the cost of keeping it on-premise and the cost of doing it in the cloud. And Copilot will give you a very, very nice answer to start with. So for me, Copilot is still my preferred assistant. I hope for you too. I'm not talking about the Copilot in Microsoft 365, but this one over here in the chatbot, which I'm opening up. The chat GPT, but in a protected environment. And here, just make sure you give enough context. So this is customer, this is what they have, this is what they are planning for. We would like to move some part to Azure. Just give me an overview of what this could mean for them. Put it in a table. On the left, the on-premise infrastructure. On the right, the equivalent in the cloud. And in the third column, a cost estimation and what it would lead to. And you will get really very, very powerful answers. So another call to invite you to use Copilot. I know I make myself redundant with this because you can also ask Copilot what would be good questions to ask at the end of a conversation. It will give you interesting feedback. But it does not take away that sessions like the one we have today are also very relevant. Now you can use either the chat or your voice. What is the most important takeaway from what we have done in this session? What is like the thing where you say, if there's one thing I'm going to take with me, it's that. So you can either use your voice or everyone needs Azure. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Well, it would be indeed a good idea to, if you're not yet there, and again, most people are. When you use Microsoft 365, you're already in Azure without knowing it. Anyone else? Other key takeaways you'd like to share? Speak now or write it down. I see Laura is typing. And while you are sharing some key takeaways, also remember that you can still book personal or small group sessions. In a couple of, well, maybe in half an hour, you will get the handouts and the recording and also the link to where you can book sessions. And I think we've already done Copilot. We've done Azure. Did we do security already together? Because I have a lot of groups and it's not always clear who has done already what. But these are some of the topics on the program. I hope you enjoyed it. And even though we started 15 minutes later, for me it was an excellent way of passing the bank holiday morning with you. Delighted to also see the interactions in the small groups. And if you liked it, spread the word. If you have other feedback, share it with me. And enjoy the rest of the day.
Hans, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Hans.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Mate.
Bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, Hans.
Thank you.
Bye.